Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody that is watching us that follows the Off the Ball Network, and all of our new listeners that will eventually stumble upon us on wherever you can find our amazing show. Welcome to the second episode ever of the Bunts and Bruises podcast, the newest podcast on the Off the Ball Network platform that we are excited to bring you each and every single Monday night. I am one of your hosts, Jurgen Koni, and alongside me, one of the greats in the sports media business now. He ain't been in a long time, but he's been in here for a good time, and he makes sure you have a great time when you listen to him. My man, James Barcia. James, how are you, bro?
Man, when you introduce me like this every week, Jurg, how can I not be in a good mood? Man, I'm on top of the world right now after an introduction like that, but I'm not feeling like my Mets over here, man. They just
Mm.
we ruined another Jacob deGrom beautiful start. We decided to waste Marcus Stroman yesterday by having him throw 9 pitches for the game to get rained out. It's just I could be a lot better on the baseball side, but besides that, man, I'm doing fantastic. Ready to go. Episode 2. It's gonna be 2 times as good as episode 1 was. I got my hat on, so my hair ain't looking
Yes.
crazy. We're good to go.
And it's funny you mentioned episode 2 because, James, I think with this, I think we could say we are in the top 10% of podcast already because most podcasts stop after episode 1. We are already in the top 10%, which is only right because I know the both of us, high class when we were graduating high school and college. So, it's only fitting with people with our grades. But in all seriousness, thank you all for joining us for tonight's episode. We're gonna get to a good amount of stuff tonight. We're gonna start off like James alluded to with some Major League Baseball going on, particularly with the Mets. But another well-known starting pitcher has had a couple things happen in recent times, so we'll dive into that situation tonight, as well as get into, of course, the NHL trade deadline, as we spoke about last week. The deadline finished just a couple hours ago. I don't want to say last-minute trades. Well, there were a couple last-minute ones. I shouldn't underplay it. There were a few last minute ones, especially one that completely shocked me. And then we'll also get into the NBA, where some massive news that I did not expect happening personally came out. So we'll get into all that on this episode of Bunts and Bruises. But before we get to that, Bunts and Bruises and every other show on the Off the Ball Network platform is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technological developments to provide you, me, James, and every single one of us listening to this right now, the best tools for a grooming experience. They are trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. Like James said last week, we hope to get that many people listening to us one day. And we have an exclusive offer for anyone listening. If you go to manscaped.com and use the code OTBN, you'll get 20% off and free shipping on your order, which, if I may personally recommend, a great thing to order would be their Perfect Package 3.0. Has everything you'll ever need to make sure that you are 100% below the belt. Right, James?
Let me tell you, that thing is just woo smooth as a baby's bottom. Your girl's gonna love it. I know my girl loved it. Just do yourself a favor, fellas. 20% off, free shipping. It's doesn't get better than that. Only thing
Yep.
better than that's like a 2 slice and a can of soda for $5. You don't even see that anymore. So go ahead, get that 20% off and free shipping. Get the lawnmower 3.0. Do yourself a favor.
Exactly. And like James said, your significant other will thank you, your balls will thank you, and only Manscaped. Manscaped is the only tool that any of us should trust to make sure you get everything off the ball. But now, James, it's funny we mentioned Manscaped now because our first topic, Trevor Bauer. Let's just say Trevor Bauer. There's been a little bit of an issue with his ball recently, his baseballs, I should say, the balls that he's been pitching. So, James, because you actually brought this situation to my attention, that just goes to show how I'm paying attention to the season early here. But break down for everyone what is going on with the Trevor Bauer situation out in Los Angeles.
Well, out in Los Angeles, the MLB is trying to make sure Trevor Bauer over here is using the lawnmower 3.0 on his baseballs because they're suspecting that he has some foreign substances that shouldn't be there. So what happened is couldn't be more Jersey than that. But my man Trevor Bauer, he's a well-known candidate when it comes to certain things as using some people say pine tar, other people say gummy, whatever you want to call it, sticky substance. This is actually a well-known thing that happens throughout the MLB. So he is a prime target at the moment because he's actually one of the advocates of pitchers who complain, saying that they should be allowed to use this, kind of like how wide receivers say they should use the sticky substance whenever catching footballs, like Jerry Rice used to do back in the day. But his main complaint actually wasn't for the fact that they took the balls to inspect. It was actually due to the fact that the information leaked because this whole process is supposed to be confidential. It's actually part of the MLB's new. They've been spending the last year to get a handle on all these pitchers using foreign substances because they're actually trying to knock it out of the game. Due to the fact that these foreign substances, due to the stickiness, it's crazy how all this pitching works because it's all just by like centimeters or millimeters of movement with your fingers and positioning.
Right.
But due to the stickiness, this adds a quicker spin rate to the baseball. So for all my casual fans out there, spin rate is basically how the ball will move. So it's either you're going to see it when it comes off the pitcher's hand, it's going to go flying up, flying down. If it doesn't have a great spin rate, that's when it looks like it's right there, a meatball, just waiting for you to freaking slam it out of the park. So a pitcher would like a higher spin rate to get those swing and missing strikeouts. So he's actually an advocate because it's kind of like those unwritten rules me and you were speaking about last week, Jurg. Every pitcher in the league does this, and everyone knows every pitcher in the league does this. It's just as long as you don't get caught. For example, Michael Pineda, who's a pitcher for the New York Yankees years ago, he did it the most blatant way possible. He actually got the roller that was in the bullpen or dugout or whatever. It's like a paint roller. This man just put it all over his neck, and somehow for some reason thought it'd be slick where he could rub his neck before every pitch, grab the ball, and pitch it.
I remember that.
Clearly, someone's going to catch up because it's not, unless you're fiending or something, you shouldn't be touching your neck that often, you know? But just to show how much the MLB is trying to get on top of all this, they actually hired and sent out a memo on March 23rd of last year telling teams we are going to knock down on this. And they hired 2 employees for each stadium. One's called a game day compliance monitor, and the other is an electric compliance officer. The electric guy is he's in charge of the cameras due to some cheaters that happened back in the day. I'm not going to say anything. It might include a trash can or not, but that's a different story. Yankee fans definitely know what I'm talking about. Astro fans, they might not forget what I'm talking about. But currently, Bauer isn't facing any league punishment. The whole thing about this process that makes it weird is, like I said, the information leaked, but the MLB is saying this is an ongoing process where they're just going to grab balls from every game, random pitchers, and just collect the information. And whatever information that may pop up, they may be able to suspend you down the road, however it may work out, which actually doesn't make any sense because Trevor Bauer, and I'm just paraphrasing his quote, he brought up a good point. How are you going to take these balls and grab any foreign substance from it and say, I put it on? It could have been easily from the catcher's glove, the third baseman's glove, the batter themselves. I could have even just threw the pitch and the batter swung it too high and it hit the inside of the bat, which is where the pine tar is supposed to be. That's supposed to be the main purpose of pine tar, is to give you grip on the baseball bat. But there's actually a rule where you can't put it too high on the bat. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. So due to Trevor Bauer's point, how are we going to pinpoint that it was him that actually put the pine tar on it, or any other pitcher who put the pine tar on it? So just like last week, I'm just here to complain. I think this is another stupid thing that baseball is looking for. They should focus on the things like marketing, like we said last week, because this is an unwritten rule that I actually agree with. If no one's complaining about it besides the league themselves, because batters certainly don't complain about it, then why are we making a huge effort in trying to eliminate this process?
Right, and I think, you bringing up how it can help pitchers is an interesting point, because I think in the game today, the math has really changed. We talk about the math changing in every single sport. We mainly hear about it in terms of basketball and football. But baseball, that math is changing. It's essentially, at this point in the league, it's home run or strikeout for a lot of at-bats, especially for a lot of the main star players in this league. When you think about an Aaron Judge and a Giancarlo Stanton both being in New York, when you think about some of the other various power hitters throughout the league, like a Miguel Sano in a smaller market in Minnesota, like these are guys where when they step up to the plate, very good chance that they're going to mash it, but just as equal the chance that they're just going to strike out and look ridiculous on that strikeout. It was a known thing in Miami. If you just threw an 0-2 pitch like to Stanton's like ankles, he'll still swing at it. It was a joke down in Miami because he was legitimately going to swing for it every single time. So I find it interesting from a competitive balance standpoint because I think some of the pitchers need help because an ERA now is a completely different stat. Like there was a time where if a pitcher had a 3.5 ERA, that was you didn't want that guy on your team, whether starter or bullpen. Now, if a guy has a 3.5 ERA, he'll have an all-star caliber season.
Mhm.
So because the math has changed like that, like I'm kind of I've never had a strong opinion on pine tar personally. So I will, submit to your knowledge in that case. If you don't think that it's going to damage the game the way Major League Baseball always try to makes it look like it will, then I don't see any reason why it should be cracked down upon like that, especially when we already have other issues in Major League Baseball that are giving issues, certain replay system. But and we'll get to that. We'll get to that on another show. But I just think this is just another example of baseball focusing on the wrong things when honestly, again, we said this last week. We love baseball. We really do, and we want it to do as good as possible. Like I said, me and James, we are that of a kin. We are fans of sports that we want to become more popular, and we want to see them grow. And it's a sad thing when Major League Baseball, a lot of turns, a lot of things that are said and done, they can control, yet they still make the mistake anyway. That's a pretty frustrating thing when it comes to that. But that's the piece on Pine Tar. We'll see if anything comes of it. Probably not, like you said. I don't think Bauer will really face any real kind of discipline from this, especially because I know he's advocated for it, but like I can't think of a time previously in his career when he's done this. So he's not a repeat offender. So I don't think they could really crack down on him. But from the woes of one ace pitcher to another, this will be the beginning of a season-long thing that we're going to do here, just because I heard these stats today and I find it absolutely ridiculous. Our DeGrom watch. So James is a Mets fan. We have a couple other Mets fans at the Off the Ball Network. And I have made it a personal goal of mine since the mid-late 2020 to be a lot nicer to the Mets and the Knicks in terms of other sports as well. So I want to be as nice as I can when I ask this question. James, why can this team never help Jacob deGrom, dude? Why can't they help him?
Jurg. It's a question as old as time. Why does the wind blow? Why is the sky blue? I mean, we know the answers for this, but for the Mets, it's just you can't figure that one out, man. You could get Einstein here to make an algorithm or something. There's analytics in the league, and we still can't help this guy out just to show it. It's just it's heartbreaking because I experienced this heartbreak twice. Not only do I experience this heartbreak with my New York Mets when just watching the Ferrari that is Jacob deGrom sitting in the trailer park, I also watch this Lamborghini of a running back and Saquon Barkley just ruining his career behind our New York Giants line, which is it's terrible to be a New York fan, but I don't understand because it's almost like we just don't try helping him out. Like I wish I could have a logical explanation for the fans here, but there's none. You watch the game, he does half the time he has run support is he's created that run support. Right. There was a time we could actually pull ahead in this weekend during this past game when he started because due to the fact that he hit a double or a single, I forgot what it was, but he was the one to get on base and he was the first runner on base for at least 3 innings, which is insane. It's just no one has any clue what to do for the man, and it's just heartbreaking. And I don't know any other guy who could. You just said it yourself, Jurg. A 3.5 is amazing ERA. This man has had a 2.38, a 2.43, and a 1.70 the last 3 years. And in total, he's had less than 30 wins. That's unheard of in anywhere. Just it's mind blowing. That I was gonna create a podcast for the Mets, but they deserve nothing good. Nothing.
Oh man, it's just crazy. So you bring up those ERA stats. I don't know which stat I find crazier this year. The fact in 2 starts so far, he has a 0.64 ERA, not a 6.4. No. A 0.64. Less than 1 run allowed between his starts so far. And those decisions, by the way, a no decision and a loss because he's so good. He's going to go deep enough for the game to always matter to him every single time. A. Or B, if you count both games he started so far, he either has an equal amount of hits or 1 less hit to the rest of the lineup through both of those games. Like, we always talk about in sports how teams fail their organizations. teams also fail their organizations. Teams fail their superstars. How badly are they failing their superstar here? Like, it's just this is levels like almost to when LeBron was in Cleveland the first time. And who was the real second best player with him? Was it by name? We know it was Shaq, but Shaq was at the very end of his career. Like, Shaq was like a 9-point per game player when LeBron got him. Or Antoine Jameson, who was just a trade deadline acquisition. Or like a Zydrunas Ilgauskas was maybe his second best player. That's a problem. Like, with DeGrom, it almost feels like a similar thing to where it's like, and it's not on the rest of the pitching staff because the Mets have had a consistently good pitching staff for a while now, at least high upside in their pitching staff. And you have some hitters now in this lineup. You just traded for Lindor in the offseason, and yet they still struggle to help DeGrom. Like, this is something that's just mind-boggling because, like, you mentioned some stats there, James. Like, go back to 2019. From 2019 to now, I think he leads the league in, like, 99 and 100-mile-per-hour pitches. Like, this ain't like one of these, like, Kershaw and Verlander have had to slow up their pitches as they've gotten older to really evolve. DeGrom's nowhere near that. So I don't understand how year after year they continue to fail him, because if it happens one time, it could be an anomaly. If it happens 2 times, maybe a little bit fluky. This is several seasons in a row. And at this point, 60 starts or so, maybe like in the 50s because of last season. Like, I don't understand how they keep doing this.
I'm glad you mentioned the new pitching staff and all. It's new ownership, and we just still can't. There's a whole new culture, and it's just these last 7, 8, whatever it is, games for the Mets, it feels like it's the same old Mets. So I don't know as a fan what to expect this year. That's why I had them actually kind of lower in my power rankings that were released before the season than most people had them. Like I said, for I don't know how many podcasts, it's the PTSD, because I just know it's like a Knicks fan. Just you're waiting for something bad to happen. You just know it's going to happen. And it's sad because when my kids and your kids and their great grandkids or whoever look at the record books, you could make an argument that Jacob deGrom, if he continues this path he's doing this year, he could arguably go down as one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher in all of baseball all time. And they're going to look at his records and be like, how? I don't understand. Like, I get the numbers, but how is he not winning? And it's the orange and blue.
And you bring up a very good point. This is a guy that has a chance to go down as one of the best pitchers of all time and one of the best of his generation. Some of the names that he's competing against, I just mentioned Clayton Kershaw. Even though this guy's a lot older in his career compared to when DeGrom started, but he still dealt with a little bit of good Justin Verlander, like around his time. Like, Verlander's won a Cy Young in the last few years. There's this one guy that's also in New York, Garrett Cole. There's that guy. There's a guy in the same division that's been tearing it up for, it feels like, since I've been in early high school, in Max Scherzer. And even though he hasn't always put up great regular seasons, Steven Strasburg was a guy with high expectations who's helped deliver on a championship. Like, there are some very talented Hall of Fame bound / also Hall of Fame talent kind of pitchers that he's dealt with in his own division and league at various points. And yet, a lot of people, when you look at those guys, it's for sure. And DeGrom, I think, is for sure. But people, like you said, no one's going to be confused when you look at Kershaw. No one's going to be confused when you look at Scherzer. And even Strasburg, because now he has the ring on the resume, because we all know how powerful that is. But with DeGrom, everyone's going to we're just going to scratch our heads and be like, what? This guy went 6-8 over a stretch, but his ERA was like up 1.7. Are you kidding me? So it's just wild. And like I think you bring up a solid point with Mets ownership as well, because they just started. So I think you need to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to tell you like specifically because, like you said, PTSD in New York sports for so long. Like there's reason to be skeptical. And like you said, you had them lower. I had the Mets as I had to fight in my mind to believe that they're my personal second wild card team in the NL this season. So it just goes to show that even, the sins of the past can still go on to haunt the present in the future. And that is what's happening with the Mets, because there's still a lot of questions about them. And this new ownership group, like, they have an opportunity to, reverse all of that. But it's at the very beginning, like, if you had to kind of give a knee-jerk reaction to it, it's not, doesn't feel like much has changed. But, we mentioned ownership, James. New ownership happening in the world of sports. The NBA, unexpectedly, like I said, just I believe within the last 24 to 48 hours, whenever this news came out, maybe even 72 hours, but essentially the Minnesota Timberwolves have been sold. The owner, Glenn Taylor, has reached an agreement with a deal where the most notable name of it is Alex Rodriguez. He is going to be part of a group that is going to buy the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the price, I could be wrong about this, the price is over $1 billion. I think I heard a price of
One and a
about
half I got here on my
$1.5 billion. So $1.5 billion for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I shudder to think what the Knicks and the Lakers would sell for if they ever sold, but $1.5 billion for the Minnesota Timberwolves to a group that I think obviously he's not the main money guy, even though he has plenty of it, but the main name is Alex Rodriguez. So James, what was your reaction to hear that A-Rod, baseball guy, at one point the most hated figure in professional baseball, most hated figure by the fans, a renaissance of his, personal public relations. Everyone loves him now. And now he is now going to be owner of a professional sports organization. How do you feel about that whole thing?
I love how you just mentioned everybody loves him now, because people do forget that he was like enemy number one about 4 or 5 years ago, and then J-Lo glowed him up real quick. But I felt a sigh of relief. That's how I felt, because I see how bad A-Rod wanted a team, and people forget he was almost the Mets owner until Uncle Steve came in and dropped the bag.
And the Marlins.
And the Marlins, yes. He's been craving to be a sports owner for a while. And here's the thing that actually people don't notice a lot is, yes, the Wolves were sold for $1.5 billion, but the sale also includes the WNBA team, the Minnesota Lynx, who are actually the more successful basketball team in Minnesota. They've won actually 4 championships in the past 10 years. So shout out to them. I think it's, good for A-Rod. He got what he want. He got his big money man here, the CEO, Mark Lore of Walmart. You can't get more money than Walmart. It's
Right.
Amazon and Walmart. They're the two runners of the world. So hopefully they could turn this franchise around. They actually have an agreement, like you said, where it stays in place, or the franchise is supposed to stay in place in Minnesota. They're actually not handing over. They're not getting full control until 2013. So my question is, not 2013, sorry, 2023. So my question is, though, when it's like 2025, I know you were asking this. Do you believe that they're going to move the team completely out of Minnesota, or do you think they're going to secretly keep them there and live by Taylor's request?
So I find it interesting because, like, with any transaction when it comes to pro sports, there's and particularly with ownership, there's so many clauses, there's so many different things that people are going to put in there, and there's so much legal jargon that's in these transactions that it's hard. No one wants to decipher it. That's why this is one of my complaints personally, as someone that wants sports to be covered in every which way. Like, this is why we don't get as much reporting on like the owners as we do the athletes, because not many people have the time, the energy, or the knowledge to be able to cover something so in depth. And of course, there are going to be people that write about this, that have already spoken and written about this, that have done a great job on it. We're not saying no one has done it yet, but just us personally, we're not going to sift through that portion of it. And we're not going to stick too much on the whole idea of, Taylor saying on his wish he does not want the team to be moved, because at the end of the day, once he's no longer with the team, how does that hold up? On Breaking the Game, Steven, shout out to him and also on Breaking the Game, and VP, one of our VPs here at Off the Ball Network, Mo, they were talking about this situation on a recent episode of Breaking the Game. And Steven brought up a really good point of, like, if A-Rod and his group tried to move it, right? If they tried to move the team, and let's say Taylor, or maybe because it will have already been sold, the city of Minneapolis, right? Or the state of Minnesota, whoever it would be, they tried to bring this to court. Like, how much would a quote unquote agreement of not moving the team hold up when at this point it's completely different, right? So that's my thing with it. I just personally don't see it staying. And look, I like Minnesota as a state. I know it's cold over there, but I personally like Minnesota. I'm a hockey guy. I respect the rich hockey tradition in Minnesota. Some great colleges there. Minnesota Duluth consistently being in the Frozen Four and in the NCAA tournament of hockey the last few years. Like, I have no ill will to Minnesota when I say this, But I kind of want the team to be moved at this point. Like respectfully. And let's move them to, again, this idea started in the Off the Ball Network group chat. Myself, Steven, and the originator, Mo. Vegas Wolves. Tell me that doesn't sound amazing. Tell me right now Vegas Wolves is not an eye catcher. I would buy a Vegas Wolves shirt or jersey of Anthony Edwards, despite the fact that there's only a 40% chance it's going to get to me on time, just like his field goal percentage. Like, but at the same time, like the notion that they could move and it could potentially be to Vegas, which I'm sure A-Rod's group is thinking about that. Like you just said, when you got Walmart backing you, they're not just going to settle for Minnesota, So that's what I think. I think there is a chance that potentially the team could get moved at some point.
See, I'm glad you mentioned A-Rod again because I personally feel like he might be dying. My man, he started up Seattle. Don't forget he played there. He got ties there still. NBA's been whispering they want Seattle to come back. I think that's a possibility. Another possibility I think is they might add another Canadian team. There's people been dying for another Canadian team due to, especially since the Toronto Raptors' success when they won the championship just a few years ago. So I think the NBA could be open if they're willing to do it, just like the NHL did it, to add more to the game. Why not throw in 2 more expansion teams? We're already going crazy thinking about changing up the playoffs and making it a full, instead of West Conference, East Conference, just talking top records of playoffs. Right. Whoever goes. Might as well add an expansion team, move them up to Seattle. No offense to Minnesota. Like you just said perfectly, though. You ain't making the most money you can in Minnesota if you're selling 2 teams, not even 1, 2 teams for $1.5 billion. And you got the Dallas Cowboys who are being valued, or the New York Knicks who are being valued for $4+ billion. So yeah. Just, the NBA is just looking at that, licking their chops and hoping A-Rod actually makes the move to wherever it may be, whether it be the Vegas Wolves, Seattle Supersonic Rebirth, or even the Vancouver, whoever, because Minnesota took the Memphis took the Grizzlies. So either way, I think it's a win-win. Hopefully, A-Rod and Lord, they'll keep the success that the Minnesota Lynx had, because they also do just draft a Rookie of the Year, Nafisha Collier. If I pronounced that right.
Right. And I like the fact that you mentioned the Minnesota Lynx towards the top of us talking about this, because they have one of the best women's basketball players of a generation and even of all time in Maya Moore, who helped them win 4 championships and has been the best player in the state of Minnesota basketball for the last decade as well. Like when she played, she's an MVP, champion, finals MVP. She's just that good. And the Lynx, the WNBA catches a lot of flack sometimes, but like you can't deny this one thing: the Minnesota Lynx have been more successful than the Minnesota Timberwolves by a country mile. So it's not even close. And I like that you also mentioned A-Rod when it comes to his ties of where else he's been. Because just think about this, James. So after Seattle, he went to Texas, then he went to New York. It's big markets, right? Big states, big markets. Then he's done. He's retired. The 2 teams that we mentioned earlier that he's tried to buy, Miami, which Florida, tax-free state, amazing weather. You could, Jeter just finally did it, got a new television contract and sponsorship deal on the stadium. Well, new sponsorship deal with the stadium. I don't know if they have the new TV contract. Let me take that part back. But at least new stadium deal, right? And then the Mets. New York, big market. Mets may be quote unquote little brother, but it's still New York. It's still NYC, right? So A-Rod's almost always been affiliated with big markets ever since he left Seattle. I'm sorry, I just don't see him staying in Minnesota. I don't see that team staying. And like you said, it could be to Vegas, or it could be to, I guess I'd assume Toronto's probably number 1 in media in Canada. So whoever could be the number 2, right? Like, just something along those lines I foresee happening. But the interesting thing about that would be, what would the future, because this transfer of power is going to come within the next 2 years or so. So what happens to Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell? Do the 2 of them potentially get moved? Are they kept on just to have a little bit of marketability on the team when they eventually, the move may even take longer than 2 years. So maybe, is there any staying power for those 2 at this point? Do you think there is now a time frame potentially on their tenure in Minnesota now?
Man, I'd be a terrible GM or owner because anytime there's a fresh start or a chance to hit reset, I'd hit it every time.
Mhm.
And the only player I'd see really worth keeping is, you said it, Anthony Edwards, wearing that Vegas Wolves jersey. Just because the highlights he's been doing this whole year and just contract wise, it matches up. The D'Lo contract, let's be honest, it's not great for them, especially due to the fact that he's barely played this season. And
Right.
the Cat contract is, I mean, Cat's great, but I'm just not a Cat fan. He's one of the softest guys in the league, I personally feel like, and he gets bullied a lot for that. So I'm all on board for trading them or just letting them walk or doing whatever you can. I'm always a trade guy because you want to get the best value you can possibly get. But it's kind of hard when you got a guy like D'Lo on that contract and you were the one that actually traded for him. So,
And traded a lot.
and trade a lot. It wasn't exactly who traded a pretty penny. So it's new ownership. It's complete. It's a wait and see game because from my perspective, like I said, I love him restart, and it wouldn't shock me because when there was speak of them buying the Mets, there was actually speak of them doing kind of like what Jeter did in Miami, where he started selling assets and tried
Mhm.
bringing down that payroll to restructure and then reset. And it was more of a marketing thing for them, I believe. There was a rumor flowing around. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does the same thing here and then fully reset Anthony Edwards, king of Seattle, Vegas, Canada, wherever it may be.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point there when it comes to when Jeter slashed payroll in Miami, because there is like, people forget about this sometimes. There's a difference between the salary cap that a team is allowed to go to and the actual money that they pay. The actual money that gets paid to these guys on actual salaries is sometimes more than the salary cap, but because the way contracts work, it can be divided into yearly a yearly average salary that's on the books, but guys get paid more. Like, a guy may have an $11 million cap it, but he's making, 13, 14, 15, $60 million, right? So it's all a money thing. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Minnesota going forward. And like you said, like we referenced earlier, our guy Mo, you and Steven, you helped us go through a lot of this, because I think ultimately there is a high chance that D'Lo and Cat do get traded. And I'm kind of on your side, James, to the point where, like, I'm also, if it's time, it's time. Just gotta ship everybody at when it comes to when it's all said and done. And Cat, D'Lo, like, I think the two of them also deserve fresh starts in their fresh restarts for their NBA careers. So I don't think it's a bad thing. But I'm loving all this trade talk, James. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, there's nothing like trade season. Trade deadlines, trade anything. But speaking of, wasn't there the trade deadline today for the NHL, correct? And it was fireworks left and right because I'm not even a biggest hockey fan. And I was like, all right, these are the three big trades I know that happened this weekend. What else do I need to know?
And funny enough, like, one or two big ones happened after he messaged
Exactly.
me.
So I was just here going crazy. I'm trying to grab all these facts, trying to learn all these names. And it was just madness today, man. And I love it. That's the kind of trade deadline you want to see. You don't want this boring, just wait and see what happens, who does what. Oh, nothing happened. Okay, let's see what happens postseason. No, these trade deadlines could change futures of anybody. We've had the Tampa Bay make move. We had the Red Wings officially just give up this year by trading Anthony.
They gave up a long time ago.
They've been rebuilding for God knows how long already, but I'm excited about these moves. My question is, Jurg, before we get deep into these moves, I see a lot of trades with all these draft picks, just like any league. How would you compare those draft round values? Is that like something more like it's kind of like you relate it to the NBA where people like me, you don't even consider those draft picks of anything of value? Or is it more like the NFL where like a first round pick's golden bar, second round picks almost just as good?
So I would, in terms of salary for the league, there's a lot of value, because when it comes to NHL draft picks, the incoming rookies have a set scale that only first round picks can potentially make more than seven figures on a yearly basis. And they can only make more than seven figures if they hit incentives that are in first round pick contracts. So the base salary for just about every single first round draft pick, I want to say, is about, and it's eventually going to change. I think we're going to get $1 million soon in terms of base salary. But the base salary of entry-level guys drafted in the first round are $900,000, $920,000, $950,000, give or take. Second round guys, just a little bit less, and then so on and so forth. So in terms of having draft picks, there is some value to it because unlike a lot of other sports where you have to sign your guys immediately, and in the NBA and the NFL, of course, there are wage scales, but your first round picks in the NFL and your high first round picks in the NBA, they're making good money right off the bat. In the NHL, your draft picks in any round are going to be making a minimum set amount of dollars. So there's a significant amount there first. Second, when it comes to the NHL, if you draft a North American born player and he wants to go play college hockey, you have his rights up until he graduates. And then there's like a grace period of when you need to sign him if you're going to keep him. Or when he comes into the league, again, a grace period on negotiating that contract. So the draft picks, I would say, if I had to compare it to the other sports, I think there's more value in the NHL draft picks compared to the other draft picks because some absolutely great players have been found in the later rounds. I think it's funny you mentioned Detroit because two of their best players within the last decade or so recently were drafted in very late rounds. Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg were both absolute gems by the Detroit Red Wings scouting crew. At one point, the best scouting department in the NHL, bar none. So, and like one of the best defensemen of all time, Nicholas Lidstrom, he was a second-round draft pick, right? So, so many guys nowadays, like, of course, people know the first round picks. They know the first overall picks, like McDavid, Crosby, Ovechkin. They were all first overall picks, right? Myself, I'm a Chicago Blackhawk fan. So Patrick Kane was a first overall pick. Jonathan Toews was third overall pick, right? But a lot of the depth to the 3 championships that the Blackhawks won, it was third, fourth, fifth round picks that would make the roster. And a legitimate chance that your 5th round pick could become one of your key players going forward in a team's championship contending window, right? So if I had to compare it, in the NHL, there is a value to picks because sometimes a first-round pick, maybe in other leagues where, like, in the NFL, you got to pile on first-round picks. Sometimes in the NHL, 1 or 2 firsts can just get the deal done because that's how valuable those picks can be for a team to kind of hit their own reset button, like we were talking about with the Timberwolves, and then rebirth and replenish the farm system, right? So it's a very mixed thing, and it always depends, right? Like certain teams, like I could say this, the Chicago Blackhawks in our championship window, we kind of just traded first round picks like candy. The Pittsburgh Penguins are just recovering from the fact that in their championship window, they dealt first round picks a lot, and it especially came back to bite them because an article I wrote quite a few months back where I detailed the decline of the Blackhawks, the Kings, and the Penguins, the constant trading of first round picks cost them, right? So that just goes to show you how you went from championship teams to the Blackhawks 3-4 years after winning their last title, missed the playoffs. While the Pittsburgh Penguins are still a playoff caliber team, they're eventually going to hit that rut of when they miss the playoffs. Los Angeles Kings, 2014, they were Stanley Cup champions. 2019, 2020, 2021, close to bottom of the barrel in the league, right? When you are too loose with your draft capital, it can cost you. So in the NHL, it's a very situational thing, but I would say overall there is value in draft picks.
I remember that Kings team that won the championship. That was actually when I tried first starting getting into hockey because it was the Rangers. I'm not a Rangers fan, but, rooting for the home team. It was them and the Kings, and that was crazy. But then, last I checked, I was just like, man, they're way down low. Like, what happened? But now with that draft explanation, that explains everything. It's kind of like all sports. You get your star guys from the top, but then you really depend on those middle guys in the middle of the round to build your team because that's how all championship teams are really made. It's not, yes, those star guys are your cornerstones, and yes, that's the foundation, but realistically, whenever you're getting over the top, it's those guys you didn't even think would make an impact that are coming here and helping you. So speaking of the guys making us impact, run us through some of these trades, Jurg. Let us know what happened today and all this madness.
So I'm first going to go with a trade that happened a couple days ago. It happened heading into the weekend really quick, and it involves the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. They traded for technically 2 players, but the main player that they traded for was David Savard from the Columbus Blue Jackets. In exchange, so this is quite an interesting deal that happened in the NHL. So what actually happened here, you can consider this a 3-team deal because how funny that they're involved in this. The Detroit Red Wings were involved, right? And this ain't the last time we're going to mention Detroit. So Columbus actually traded the Savard to the Red Wings and retained half of his salary cap hit for this season, cap hit in salary. Detroit then followed it up and traded away Savard to the Tampa Bay Lightning as a part of this deal. So Detroit got a 4th-round pick back for being a part of this deal and retaining some salary. Columbus got Tampa Bay's 1st-round pick this year and a 3rd-rounder as well, right? So here's the thing with it. The reason why it happened like this, and this is a very recent trend in the NHL, it's these multi-team deals where the player is technically going to go to the 3rd team to get their salary reduced so then they could go to the primary team that wants them. Because in the NHL, when it comes to salary cap hits, a player's cap hit is such a critical thing when it comes to mid-season deals. And this, I believe this was from the last lockout, you can now retain salaries of up to 50% on a player's yearly cap hit. Now, here's the thing, though. That's for the entirety of a deal. So if this was a 3-year deal, Columbus and Detroit would be having these hits still on there for 2 more years. But Savard's just on a 1-year deal, I believe. This was the last year of a contract extension he signed years back. And so he gets traded to Detroit, half the salary Columbus keeps. Gets traded to Tampa Bay, boom, half the salary Detroit keeps. And now he's making, I think it's just over or just under $1 million on the cap hit while being on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So why is this deal so critical? For the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's adding more blue line depth. One of the underrated reasons why they won the Cup last year was their blue line. They had a couple of veterans there in Kevin Shattenkirk and Zach Bogosian that left them in free agency in the 2020 free agency because those guys, well, especially in Shattenkirk's case, he got paid pretty handsomely to go over to Anaheim. So they know that blue line depth is important. They have 3 great guys, especially a stud in Victor Hedman, one of the best defensemen in the league, and a youngster in Mikhail Sergachev, who he's a pretty good player. His offensive stats aren't off the charts, but if you just see him on the ice, you see why he impacts winning, right? So they needed that 4th bona fide defenseman to put up there with their 3 guys that they have, and Savard is the perfect puzzle piece to that. It's going to take like a couple games here to get him acclimated in the system and the team, but ultimately he is going to play a key part in them trying to repeat as champions because it's exactly that. In recent years, because sports is a copycat league, James, one of the key things within the last decade or so, and again, I'm going to draw from my Chicago Blackhawk fandom here, having 4 defensemen you can rely on for the bulk of the minutes from your defensive core, that's been a key to a lot of Cup champions. And so now Tampa Bay has that. They have their 4th bona fide guy that's going to help complete them and round out the group of the team that's going to eat up a lot of minutes, right? And now that's how it benefits Tampa. Let me tell you what a lot of people are focusing on here. And this isn't the only trade that has to deal with this. In the NHL, we have the long-term injury reserve. And so when you place a player on the long-term injury reserve, you actually get cap relief for putting them there. But you can bring that player back in the playoffs, and it'll be no issue whatsoever on the cap. This is the key here because the Tampa Bay Lightning, their former MVP winner, Nikita Kucherov, has over a $9 million cap hit, but he's on long-term injury reserve. Part of the reason why the Lightning had to get all these cuts was to already fit Savard under the cap already. But now because of this, because they fit him under the long-term injury reserve, when Kucherov gets back to the playoffs, they will have their full roster and technically be over the cap, but it just doesn't matter come playoff time. So this is a 4D chess level move right here by the Tampa Bay Lightning because you're adding that defenseman to help complete your crew, and you're going to get your MVP back come the playoffs. And that has set off a lot of fans because they are not happy that is the case. Personally speaking, I'm cool with it because at the end of the day, they're just playing the game better than everybody else. It's like Bill Belichick in the NFL. Like one of the reasons why the Pats lasted for 2 decades was he kept making those right moves to make sure that they were always a step ahead of everyone. And this is just one of those cases where Tampa Bay is a step ahead. You're telling me you just added your 4th best defenseman now in Savard, he's going to throw the body around, and on an offensive team, he's going to look a bit better offensively than he would normally. And you're going to get your MVP back for the playoffs? This is easily an A+ move by the Tampa Bay Lightning.
That 4D move isn't even the description, Jerry. That's a 12D move. They're paying what, a quarter of the contract, from my understanding.
They're going to pay a quarter of what this year's salary cap hit was to have him on the team.
That's just insane. And then they got picks. They got the just 4th defensive man. How do you create a deal like that? Because they clearly got to have one of the best front offices in the league just to make a move like this. And like you said, I believe that wasn't even the only move they made. They made two other moves. No?
This was their predominant move. No other real notable moves by them. It was a handful of other teams that were active at the deadline in terms of trading players. But ultimately, like if you're talking about moves that like stick out to you above everyone else, Tampa Bay actually, to be fair, they did make a move with the San Jose Sharks, but that's more of like a random depth player that they add. Like he may show up for them come playoff time potentially. But this is like the most noteworthy move made by them. And like I said, they're not the only team that did this because there's a certain team. I want you to introduce it because you pointed this out before. There's a certain team north of the border that made a nice move. Nice move today.
Which one? There's a whole bunch of North. I'm assuming we're talking about Nick Fogliano because that was the big one. The Maple Leafs trade. That was the first trade I sent you, and I was like, this is the really big one I got to read up about, right? And
yes, look up absolutely. So within the last 24 hours as well, the now former captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets, yes. Nick Foligno, was traded over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. A first and a fourth round pick are going to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and a fourth round pick is going to the San Jose Sharks because, again, this was another one of those deals where a third team helped to get involved and eat up some of the salary. So essentially, similar thing happened here. The Blue Jackets retained 50% of the original salary for Foligno on this season to send him to San Jose. Then San Jose ate the remaining 50% of that salary. So essentially, if we're going by percentages, 50% to Columbus, 25% to San Jose, and now Toronto's just on the hook for 25% of it as well. Another deal where this happens, they trade a first round pick to Columbus and some fourths get here as well. 1/4 to Columbus, 1/4 for San Jose for their troubles. Again, when you talk about maneuvering the salary cap, Tampa Bay has been good at it for a long time. Toronto continues to impress me. For a guy who gets a lot of criticism, Kyle Dubas is a wizard when it comes to the salary cap because he has 3 players on his team whose cap hits are $10 million or more. Never in the wildest dreams of NHL fans a couple years ago when Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews signed their big extensions. So that's just 2 guys on those cap hits. You're telling me if you would have told an NHL fan 5 years ago, there's going to be a team with 3 guys making $10 million or more and another guy that's making almost $7 million and another guy who's making like, I think Morgan Riley, he's either making 5 or 6 million, I believe. Underpaid, by the way, because it's an older contract extension. Maybe it's actually closer to 7. I apologize for not knowing the number off the top of my head, but it's around that range, right? So you're telling me a team, 5 players of $7 million or more on their cap, and he continues to make these moves to surround them with the right pieces. Now, there have been a couple misses, swings and misses, right? And there have been a couple bad contracts that he's also had to get out of. But the key is he also gets out of those as well. Like, he has just constantly done this. And some of those bad contracts were not from him. They were from the previous regime, right? So when you are a young general manager, because he's one of the younger ones in the league, and you continue to make them, really at this point, they are a Stanley Cup contending team without question. When you continue to add to a contender and you get rid of the bad contracts from the previous regime, and also one that you signed, but we won't get into that. Like, when you're able to do that and constantly be a winner, that is the sign of a truly, truly good general manager. And that is one of the key things to keep in mind. When it comes to Stanley Cup contenders in the NHL, good management.
One of the coolest things I thought about this trade when I was looking into it is actually Nick's father, Mike Foglino. I'm pronouncing his name right? Foligno. Sorry. Jurg is the official name checker, in case you guys didn't know, the Off the Ball Network. You don't know a name, my man, he'll get it right on. Doesn't matter the language or anything. So, but yeah,
language.
He'll figure it out. Don't worry. Don't listen to him. But yeah, his father, Mike Foligno, actually played 129 games with Toronto for 4 seasons. I thought that was one of the coolest things. I'm always a fan of these athletes who play in the same team as their father or brother or somebody from a different generation played.
Right.
So I thought that was one of the cool things. The Blue Jackets were actually another team, just like the Tampa Bay Thunder, who made another 3 trades in like 3 days, like just bang, bang, bang. That's what I'm loving about this NHL trade deadline, as we've said countless times today. It's nonstop action because I'm glad you now formed me with knowledge about how these contracts and these deals work, because there was another trade I saw when looking into this, and it was actually the Taylor Hall trade.
Yes.
I thought it was insane that the Bruins took 50% of his remaining contract, but now I guess they screwed up because apparently they could have got a third team and had somebody else pay a fourth for the contract or something.
Right.
But why don't you get a little more into that, Jurg?
So the Buffalo Sabres had to retain 50% of the contract for Taylor Hall because he signed with them on a 1-year deal in the 2020 offseason, right? And going back to my second article, I think it was my first or second article that I wrote for the network. It feels like such a long time ago at this point. I believe I put Taylor Hall as one of my losers because he signed with Buffalo on a 1-year deal, and no one had expectations for Buffalo going into this season. I had a little bit because I thought there was enough talent there, like they could at least have been somewhat competitive. Little did I realize that it would come to a point where one of the guys, the lone bona fide player, because Boston traded a prospect and a second rounder to Buffalo. The prospect, I went on his Wikipedia page this morning, and instead of the team history being Boston Bruins, Buffalo Sabres, it was Boston Bruins and Dumpster Fire. So that should just let you know how bad the Buffalo Sabres have been this season. So their trading started a week and a half or so ago at this point, where they traded Eric Stahl, another one of their 1-year veterans from the offseason. They traded him up to Montreal, the Canadiens de Montréal. Had to flex a little bit of my, the only French I know there.
How can you tell me you don't know multiple languages and then you do that, Jerk? See, don't buy it, folks.
I probably messed that up. Someone that knows French is going to get at me. But anyways, so they traded Stahl to Montreal, and now they trade Hall to Boston. They only get a second rounder back. Now, when they said they wanted a first rounder, everyone knew they weren't going to get a first rounder. Not only because they've been the garbage team that they've been this year, but Taylor Hall has had such a down year to the point where everyone is now questioning, like, he was literally the MVP. He won the MVP trophy, I think, now going back 3 years. And he's now to a point where you got a second rounder back for him in a deal and a 24-year-old prospect. This is not an 18, 19, 20-year-old. This is a 24-year-old guy that Boston sent you back that's already played a little bit in the NHL. And I'm assuming he's going to play on Buffalo's roster for the remainder of the season because, like, you kind of have to get him in the lineup. But just nothing has gone the Sabres' way from everything when you consider absolutely everything that the trade deadline should have been for them in terms of the pieces that they had and what they got back. Because another guy they actually traded, again, this is going not too far back, just a couple days ago, but the Sabres traded a defenseman, Brendan Montour, for just a third-round pick from the Florida Panthers. And that was a big deal for Florida. Just a shout out to them real quick. They lost their best defenseman, Aaron Ekblad, for the season, essentially. Some people are trying to hold out hope that he may be back. He's done for the year. I don't foresee him coming back unless they make the Stanley Cup Finals. And they have to deal with the Carolina Hurricanes and the Tampa Bay Lightning in the divisional playoffs. So let's just assume that they may not make it past both of them, which will be the likely scenario that they would have to do, right? So it's some good defensive depth for Florida, but again, just a third-round pick back for a defenseman that maybe if they were better, if his stats could have been better, if the team was better, maybe they could have tried to negotiate a second-round pick. And with Taylor Hall, like, I saw someone bring up a really good point on a comment section about this post. Like, what are the chances that there was probably a better deal here, and the Sabres either didn't they didn't wait long enough for it, or they actually thought this was the deal for them? So it's just a myriad of mismanagement over in Buffalo, and it's just a disappointment. But for Taylor Hall, this is a chance for him to be on the greatest team he has ever been on in his career, because he did not really get to play with Connor McDavid when McDavid was coming into the NHL. I believe my timeline might be wrong, but he either only played a little bit with McDavid or he got traded just before McDavid started playing in the league to New Jersey. Now I think about it, I think he was traded just before McDavid really made his true mark on the Oilers. So this is a guy who's never played with gobs of talent in his career, right? Has never had that honor. He's helped lead teams to one lone playoff appearance, but aside from that, nothing else. Now he gets to be on a team that made the Stanley Cup final back in 2019. He is going to play with guys who have won a Stanley Cup. He's going to play with a coach who a lot of people would say is one of the best coaches in the league that Boston has. Like, just so many factors are now in Taylor Hall's way that he now needs to produce. When you talk about a guy like who won and who lost this deal, Taylor Hall, this is he's going to be the true winner or loser from this deal. Because if he plays well with Boston and if he helps them go on a legitimate run, he will get paid this offseason. But if he doesn't, and he still can't get that stench from being on Buffalo in his last year in New Jersey off of him, then it's going to have to be a 1-year deal again next offseason for even less money than what he got this year. So it's going to be really interesting. Boston has actually allegedly already, made it known to Hall's crew that they may want to re-sign him. We'll see what happens there. But for now, that's what the deal is. Buffalo, honestly, in all their deals, they could have gotten a lot more back if they had played their cards a lot better. So if you're going to ask me one bona fide loser, it's the Buffalo Sabres, without a doubt.
I'm glad you mentioned that Taylor Hall actually played with no talent, just to show how little talent he played with. Before I started trying to become a casual fan of the NHL, I was a New Jersey Devils fan, because I'm from Jersey, so gotta hail for your home team. But I feel like they made it hard to watch hockey because they've just been so bad since they won the Stanley Cup. What was it, 15 years ago? However many years ago it was we won it. We just been god-awful terrible. So it just makes all the sense in the world that I became a Vegas Knights fan the moment I was like, hey, new team, you start. Like I said earlier in the episode, I pressed that restart button real quick. I saw my opportunity and I left just like A-Rod. But the craziest thing about this Taylor Hall deal is he actually, from what I was reading, wanted to go to Boston last year, but ultimately just ended up going with Buffalo. And I guess the cards played right. Well, I mean, clearly he didn't play right, but something ended up working out where Buffalo was able to trade him to Boston. And like you said, I was reading where it seems like they're going to get this contract deal done due to the fact that he actually said himself, due to his down years, he's not the most confident hockey player anymore. And he's had his ups and downs. And he actually said, and I quote, I have to find that part of my game. I'm glad I'm not going to be the focal point of this new team.
Yeah, he's nowhere near the focal point of that team. There's David Pastrnak, there's Krejci, there's Patrice Bergeron, there's Brad Marchand. Like, I've already said 4 guys who are going to be pivotal parts of the team. And then let's go to the defensive crew. There's just one guy that I would consider over him, and that's the young Bruin defenseman Charlie McAvoy. Like, he is a more focal point to that Bruins team than Taylor Hall will be coming in. You're now saying that for his entire career, when he's had to be the guy, the main name, he now gets to be the 6th name on offense and the 7th name on the team, because Tuukka Rask of the Boston Bruins, that's a very good goaltender in this league. That's a top 10 goalie. So you're saying of the names on this list, Taylor Hall is going to be the 7th most impressive guy? That team is loaded if that is the case. And honestly, good for Taylor Hall. Like, you mentioned it with confidence. Like, our shout out to President Chris LeBron and VP Mo. They've done some shows recently when it talks about mental health and what guys have to deal with. I hope for Taylor Hall, he's able to regain his confidence and his stride in his tenure with Boston. And I hope he finds them for long term, because he's always just wanted to stay somewhere long term. Like, Edmonton did sign him to an extension, but of course they traded him. So that kind of hurt him a little bit. Like, I think ultimately I would personally, as a feel good thing, I would love if he could resign and do well with the Bruins, because he's just not a guy, like, he's never came off as like a standoffish personality. He's just never been that, right? He's just been a good guy. I remember when he was like a rookie, like, I would love watching the videos the Oilers did with their rookies, and Taylor Hall was always just like a gem there. Like, he's just always been like a nice, like, very down to earth kind of guy, right? So you hope the best for him with Boston, truthfully, because like he is a very talented player. He's a good player, and I think Boston is the perfect place for him.
Yeah, I mean, you love hearing those comeback stories, Cinderella stories, however you may want to call it. This man, like you said, won an MVP in 2017. He's had some down years, and he's a great guy. So if you could be a former MVP only 3-4 years ago and now be put into the 6th auction, like you said, I can only imagine if everything works out, they do extend him. Maybe he ends up being the number 3 guy or something like that in 2 years from now. He finds some of that spark back, gains some of that confidence. It's like you said, shout out to Mo and Prez for the video, for their episodes based on mental health. Everybody, if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely check that out. But I'm a big advocate of mental health, supporting it. And I'm also a big believer in, if you don't have confidence, regardless if you're an athlete or just an everyday person in your job, it's going to be tough to get any job done. But speaking of tough to get any job done, Detroit traded for Anthony Mantha I knew
No, they traded him away. They
They traded him away. That's what I meant. Sorry, my apologies. They traded him away. Do you trust Detroit with these picks that they got for Anthony Mantha?
So the full deal is Jacob Vrana, Richard Panik, a 2021 first and a 2022 second round pick is what Washington traded over to Detroit for Anthony Mantha. Now, Detroit won this deal. Really? Shocker, ain't it? with how we've been talking about them. So here's why they won this deal. Even though that first round pick is going to be late, this is not the Detroit Red Wings team that lost the dynasty, that lost the playoff streak that they had of making the playoffs for, I believe it was 23 years in a row, what the playoff streak was. 23 years in a row they made the playoffs before they finally missed it. And the old regime made them miss it. The old general manager, Ken Holland, who, for all intents and purposes, he's a hockey Hall of Famer for his career and what he has done for the league. But at the same time, he no longer should have been the guy there. Years ago, Red Wings ownership offered him to step down and be more of an advisor for Steve Yzerman, former Red Wings captain, to take over. By the way, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who we spoke about earlier, you want to know who built that team? Steve Yzerman built that team. He was the general manager that saw them get the MVP of the league a few years ago, Nikita Kucherov. That gave them arguably the best goalie in the league right now, Andrei Vasilevsky. He made the trades to get the picks, and he made, along with the scouting department, shout out to all the scouting departments in every single league, but especially the NHL, to find these guys, pinpoint these guys, and go after and ultimately trade for, draft, and sign guys long-term. And some late-round undrafted guys as well. Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat. Like, Tampa Bay has just been like a machine of churning out forwards where they'll bring them up, and if they extend them, they'll eventually trade them away because they have another guy coming up that could fill that role, right? So that guy and his scouting department is leading Detroit. Now, here's why Washington made this deal, because a lot of people are saying, why did Washington make this deal? It's because Jacob Vrana is a free agent in the offseason. The Capitals have $10 million of cap space right now after making this deal for next offseason. Now, before that, it was $15 million. So I know some people are thinking, well, wouldn't they have been able to afford Vrana? Potentially, but here's the thing. As a young guy, a restricted free agent who could test the market and could have actually even gotten a offer sheet, he maybe would have gotten paid $6, $7, $8 million if a team would have overpaid, right? And maybe they would have had to pay that. You know who's also a free agent next offseason, James?
Not a clue, Jurg, so why don't you inform me?
Alex Ovechkin, the superstar. The goal scorer of his generation, and probably
that guy,
the best of all time. Exactly. So when you need to re-sign the captain and the guy for your team, you need to make sacrifices. And this ain't the last deal. This is the last deal for today, obviously, because the deadline's over. But this ain't the last deal they're going to make. Early in the offseason, they're probably going to trade off one or two of their depth pieces because they're going to want to give Ovechkin a handsome contract to try to have him finish off his career. They're not going to sign him to a 1-2 year send-off deal. It's going to be like a 5-6 year deal, good money because he's still producing at this level, and they want him to retire a capital. And I think he should. Like in the NHL, it's a massive deal. If you think Tom Brady switching teams was big, like in the NHL, it almost feels like literal Twilight Zone when a guy that's been on a team his entire career actually switches legitimately. And there have been some cases, funny enough, in NHL history, but that's just how it goes, right? So at the end of the day, I like this deal for Detroit because they got a first-round pick back, a second-round pick back, and a young guy in Vrana back for a power forward type player in Mantha, who he doesn't even throw the body that much. Now, he's had good seasons. He scored 20 goals a couple of times, and so far that's what Vrana has shown. But now Vrana gets he's going to get extended by Detroit. They're going to sign him to a contract extension. Detroit has plenty of cap space, so they're going to keep him. Panik is a player that's just going to be buried on that team because he's no longer like a valuable depth piece, what he was a couple years ago when Washington first extended him. Like, I feel like the second round pick was in part they had to unload Panik a little bit to start preparing for Ovechkin, right? So I think that's part of why the second had to be given up. I'll say that because I think the first and Vrana by itself would have gotten Mantha, but they wanted to get rid of Panik too, if I had to guess. So that's what the second round pick was for. And with Steve Yzerman running things in Detroit now for a few years now, he's made some very good draft picks. Like there's a chance that they can hit on these picks. And now they have multiple first-round picks and multiple second-round picks over the next couple of years. What I like about Detroit, for as much as we kind of poke fun at them, they are doing it right for a sports team. They know they need to rebuild, and they're doing it. And you can't ask for any more from a team.
Detroit fans are hoping that the Lions follow suit because this sounds almost exactly like the Lions deal that happened over the season where they traded that extra pick to get where the Rams traded that extra pick to get rid of the Jared Goff contract and the Lions took it. You got now the Red Wings doing the same thing, taking an extra contract, getting that extra pick. So things might be looking up for Motown over there. Hopefully they can look like Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay sounds like they just won the Super Bowl. They had a World Series appearance. By all counts, with the moves they made this past
And they won
weekend,
the cup. And they won the cup.
And they won the cup. It sounds I completely forgot they just won it. I was about to say, by all counts, it looks like they're about to make another run for it. So what a year it's been to be a Tampa fan. But I'm excited. I'm gonna keep an eye on the Red Wings now that you said this because I always love hearing about those GMs who come and build one franchise, such as what's his name? Name slips my tongue. He went from the Warriors, then he went to the Clippers. Really famous guy. Jerry West, Jesus, the logo. Oh my God. Wow. Woo. Either way. I love hearing stories like that where you got Jerry West or somebody like that coming from a front office and taking their same philosophy and bringing it to another franchise, just changing it. Because not only did you say this guy had a great career, he's also he's adding on to the resume and adding on to his legacy. And you love seeing that from players who just advance their career into the front office and just in all aspects run a league. It's always a fun thing to watch like that.
Hall of Fame player, already a Hall of Fame executive. Like that Stanley Cup for Tampa Bay, even though his name ain't going to be on there for Tampa Bay's winning, he built that team. All due respect to current Tampa Bay management, Steve Yzerman built that team, right? So at the end of the day, he's already proven he's an amazing GM. He's already proven that his team can technically win a cup. He just didn't stay there to see it through, right? So that's ultimately how it is. And he's going to get the chance here to win it in Detroit. And this is a very common thing in hockey, funny enough. Like former players becoming executives, like that is a very regular thing. And also coaches here and there, but executives like the New York Rangers, one of their assistant general managers and the general manager to their AHL team is Chris Drury, a former player. Not necessarily, an all-time kind of guy, but still a former player, had some success. I believe won a Stanley Cup in his career, if I'm not mistaken. Like former NHL players becoming executives and then actually doing pretty good for themselves is actually a very common thing in the league. So Steve Yzerman is just like the best example of that because this guy, he essentially, like we talk about Brady having 2 Hall of Fame careers in his playing career. Yzerman had a Hall of Fame playing career and is now forging together a Hall of Fame executive career. Like, I don't know if they can induct him twice, but if someone deserves it, he should because he has been that good as a general manager easily. He was the top prospect to become a general manager when he was waiting in the wings. And Tampa Bay got lucky when they got him. They really did. And now Detroit, they welcome him back, I believe, a year and a half or 2 years ago at this point. Best decision they could have made.
You couldn't say it ain't better. He was waiting in the wings, and now he's with the Red Wings. He's going to go ahead, take off, fly, and hopefully they don't affect my new Vegas Knights. I'm going to keep an eye on them because there's nothing I love watching than watching a GM in front office get it right and build a franchise from the ground up. So can't wait to see him take these picks and do something with them.
Absolutely. And, speaking of picks, we're going to run down the show here, entering our final moments. A lot of other minor moves happened today, so we're not going to get too much into detail, but just general things that I'm going to say about a lot of these deals that happen is just teams really bulking up for the playoffs. You have a team such as the Toronto Maple Leafs, again, when we talk about teams that made deals, they made some minor moves. They got a Ben Hutton from the Anaheim Ducks. The Winnipeg Jets traded for Jordy Ben from the Vancouver Canucks. Moves like that, they may not seem important, but here's why they're actually important. Because defensemen, like I said, are key for a playoff run. So those are just extra. Those are veterans, bottom 6 defensemen. They're going to be your last 2 defensive pairing there. And they're going to help get, hopefully give quality minutes, grind down the other team, have quality time on the ice so that when your stars get back out there, there's still a chance in the game. So that's why a couple of those deals have been. Not all the deals are star-ridden in the NHL. And rarely do we get such a star-driven NHL trade deadline. I personally can't think of one that's happened in quite a while in my fandom lifetime. But these kinds of deals are very, very familiar. The Edmonton Oilers also, they traded for Dmitry Kulikov from the New Jersey Devils, actually, and they traded a conditional 4th-round pick. The Pittsburgh Penguins, I guess maybe the last deal noteworthy for today, well, one of 2. The Colorado Avalanche traded for Devin Dubnyk. He's key because that's a backup goalie, which they've needed the entire season for to relieve starter Trevor Bauer. And if you read my NHL Power Rankings, which today's came out earlier, I talk about the Vegas Golden Knights and having two goalies is so critical for them, right? So same thing with Colorado. You need that second goalie. He's the perfect guy. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins traded for Jeff Carter, a name, if you know hockey. He was on those LA Kings championship teams, like I mentioned, from earlier in the 2010s decade. And funny enough, he's a former Philadelphia Flyer. And who is one of the key decision makers in the Penguins executive crew right now? I believe he's the VP of hockey operations, or he's the GM, either one, because Brian Burke returned in hockey to manage the Pens. But one of their key guys, Ron Hextall, what team did he play for? The Philadelphia Flyers. Couple Philadelphia guys may find some success in Pittsburgh, so Flyers fans they're not happy right now with that with that news.
Man, there's nothing that's just the absolute worst. Watching your guy go to literally the complete rival is just that. What could be more heartbreaking than that? It's you look at them like, who are you? I don't even know you. Like you're a whole different person.
And also, what could be worse if he wins with the Penguins?
Oh, it'd be like Belichick watching Brady over there in Tampa, just crying at night, staring at his picture.
And while he may not be that caliber of player, ladies and gentlemen, you will learn this as we talk about hockey, because over the next few weeks, me and James, we're gonna teach you guys a little bit more of the nuances of the NHL and the MLB and certain things. Let me tell you, when it comes to this, when it comes to the rivalries in hockey, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia goes from the organization to the fans. So Jeff Carter is no Tom Brady, but to the fans, if the Penguins find real success, it will be that kind of scorn as if he was a Tom Brady-like figure, right? That's how personal hockey fans take it. Just to let everyone know. So we got to start to educate them a little bit, James, because we love our sports, right?
Hey, just so all the fans know as well, I'm getting educated as well as you guys. I try educating myself on the side here. Jurg gives me my little notes, tells me the things to keep my eyes open for and what plays. But I'm learning as much as you guys are learning, and I'm having fun with it every single moment. The NHL is definitely a league everybody got to get more into. They're more entertained than MLB, unfortunately. The MLB, we're facing the bruises right now, but it's all right. Both our sports are going to get back up top. I can't wait. Hopefully everybody here listens. You're back next week and the week after that, and we're just going to keep on helping you guys, casual fans, even the more advanced fans, just love the games we love as much as we love them.
And to your point, James, I too learned a lot of baseball from you. You are our baseball guy, and that is one of the awesome things about our network. We really do cover all sports. And with our show, of course, we've talked about all sports the last few weeks, but of course, our love for baseball and hockey shines through. And like you said, both our sports, we go through some bruises, but at the end of the day, success is always right there. But speaking of success, I would say today's show was a success for us, James, and that will bring us to the end of today's show. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. We appreciate it. Of course, episode 2 about to wrap up, James, in that top 10%, man, and I'm very excited.
There you go.
Remind the people, man. Remind the people, where can they find you?
You guys follow me on Twitter at Bars Talks. Follow our podcast Twitter. It was actually just released this week. Bunts&Bruises. That's it. Simple as that. Same way we spell the show name right there on the logo. Boom. I practiced that at least 3 times before the show to make sure I hit that. But yeah, follow us there. Make sure you get your 20% and free shipping from Manscaped, our sponsors. Shout out, actually, because we shouted them out last time. Shout out to the Baby Picasso Cruz for making our kick it. That's just, yes. I don't even get mad when it blocks my face like that, because honestly, it's just such a good logo. How could you not? Other than that, Jurg, I had fun this week as always, man. I can't wait till next Monday.
Absolutely, 100%. And like you said, shout out to Manscaped. Remember, for the people that want to get a pretty good discount, you'll get 20% off and free shipping if you use the code OTBN on their website. Remember, promo code OTBN to help support the network. You know, because everyone at the network uses Manscaped. We all love it. And it is just a great partnership that we have with them. And again, it just makes sense. And speaking of making sense, you can follow our podcast at Bunts&Bruises, like James said. And you can listen to us on Anchor and Spotify are the 2 main places. Of course, couple other ones as well. Thank you, Anchor, for how amazing you are. But Anchor and Spotify are the top 2 places to get it. And you can follow myself at JurgK40 on Instagram and Twitter. And at the end of the day, go to offtheballnetwork.com for all the amazing work that our guys, all of our guys do. We mentioned a couple of them throughout the show. Mo, Chris LeBron, Steve, and of course, everyone else. Jeff, Cruz, thank you to him for the amazing logo. At the end of the day, Off the Ball Network is the place to go for up-to-date sports content, hot takes, whatever you want out of your sports content needs. You get them at offtheballnetwork.com. So thank you all for joining us for episode 2. And don't worry, we're going on to 3, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to keep on pushing.
Top 5%.
Yes. And we will be back next week.
Rest in peace, DMX.